Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Angel, for the introduction. As always, we are super grateful to be able to use this space in the Ann Arbor District Library downtown here. They're a fantastic partner, and we always love being able to use this amazing room. It's a much more highly produced event than we can do on our own. So again, we always appreciate the library's support. But as Angel said, my name is Jordan Larson. I'm a staff member with Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations. And we're super glad that you've joined us this evening for what is the third session of our Sustainability Forum series. This is a monthly series that takes place January through May, the beginning of each year. And really the goal is to bring experts, city staff, change makers, local stakeholders together to talk about the inspiring and amazing sustainability work happening throughout our community. Also really glad that you're spending this evening with us now that the weather is actually nice enough that you could be outside. The first couple sessions we had, it was probably about 5 degrees outside, so the weather is always a little bit of a challenge, but again, we thank you for spending your evening with us. And now I'm really excited to present this evening our topic of climate action for renters, breaking barriers to participation. But before we jump into the session and I introduce the speakers, I just want to give a really quick overview of kind of where we are in the series schedule. So we have 2 more events after this one to round out the 2026 series. So next month on April 28th, the last Tuesday of the month, we will be celebrating the A2ZERO Community Cookbook. Now, this forum is going to be super fun. I really encourage everyone to come out. We will be doing a cooking demonstration of a recipe from the community cookbook, as well as sharing personal stories of some of the other contributors of the cookbook. So this is going to be a really fun one. We hope you come out. And then we'll be rounding out the series in May on the 26th for a session focused on building social resilience in ways that you can get connected and become a change maker in your local neighborhood and community. So to take a look at the agenda for this evening, I'll kick us off by providing just a little bit of introduction and framing around the topic. Then I will do panelist introductions, and then we'll get to what we're all looking forward to, which are a number of fantastic panel presentations. We will round out the evening with some audience Q&A. So throughout this evening, we encourage you to think about what's being presented, keep track of any questions you may have, and we'll have time for discussion and questions at the end. And then as we close out, I will share a little bit of additional information about how to stay engaged with the work happening in the city. And we should maybe have a few extra minutes for some casual conversation as well. But with that, I can get us started on some context for this evening. So as many of you may know, A2ZERO is Ann Arbor's living plan to achieve a just transition to carbon neutrality by the year 2030. And here on the slide, we have listed the 7 strategies that are composed within the plan. But for this evening in particular, I want to highlight the first 3, those being focused around deployment of renewable energy, electrification, and energy efficiency. And now A2ZERO is a very ambitious goal. And we recognize that to achieve a community-wide transition to carbon neutrality, that means that renters must be included and part of the transition. And they occupy just over 50% of all housing units in Ann Arbor. So it's a really important portion of our community and something that we really need to be intentional about when we're pursuing a plan as ambitious as A2ZERO. But before we get into all of the resources and programs and stories available that can help people on this journey, it's important to acknowledge that there are some kind of built-in barriers or some challenges for rental units when it comes to these areas of renewable energy, electrification, and energy efficiency. And the main issue here is something that's referred to as the split incentive. Landlords are responsible for investing in their properties. So if they were going to make some sort of energy improvement, like adding insulation to their unit, that would be a cost for them. However, in most rental arrangements, as I'm sure most of you are aware, tenants pay the utility bills, which means that any of the financial benefits of these energy improvements that may be made in units would be felt and received by the tenants rather than the landlords. So in other words, landlords aren't all that incentivized to make these sorts of energy improvements. From a zoomed out national perspective, this means that generally rental units are less efficient than owner-occupied units. You can think about per square foot of a dwelling where someone lives, right? And it can look at around or more than 20% less efficient for rental units compared to owner-occupied units. So this is just an inherent challenge and one that we recognize and we know we have to respond to. The last barrier that I want to highlight before we get into the presentations is also that there are limited levers that we can pull when it comes to maybe thinking about forcing improvements in energy efficiency. Building codes exist, and we don't necessarily have the opportunity at a city level to just change those. And this is something we're going to get into a little bit more in some of the presentations. But there is this inherent challenge of how do we overcome this incentive gap when there's limited things that we can do and leverage that we can take around rental units and energy transition. So that's some of the background for today. But we're going to hear some presentations and learn about some really great resources from this evening's fantastic panelists, which is my pleasure to introduce now. So immediately to my left, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Joe Lang. Joe focuses on the design, implementation, and development of various residential energy-related programs in the Office of Sustainability and Innovations, including the Green Rental Housing Ordinance. Prior to joining the city, Joe worked with scientists, local governments, and wildlife managers across Indiana to prepare for environmental change. Joe has a master's in environmental science and an MPA from Indiana University and a BA in environmental policy from Michigan State. In his free time, he enjoys wildlife watching, hiking, and spending time with his cat and dogs. Join me in welcoming Joe. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Andy Pamprine. Andy is a green rental housing consultant and co-founder of Checklist Masters of Ann Arbor, which he'll talk a little bit about in his presentation. He also performs blower door tests and makes improvements to energy efficiency and weatherization in single-family homes, as well as air sealing, drill and fill insulation, thermostat installations, all kinds of great energy work. He graduated from Eastern Michigan University with an environmental science degree, and before working on Checklist Masters, he worked as a fisheries field technician for state agencies. Join me in welcoming Andy. Last but certainly not least, it's my pleasure to introduce Hannah Larsenes. Hannah is a graduate of the University of Michigan with a BS in ecology and evolutionary biology and biological anthropology. Her professional background includes life sciences research, environmental consulting, and small business entrepreneurship. She currently manages her small family's retail business, 4 Directions, in downtown Ann Arbor. Hannah became interested in housing policy after being displaced due to hazardous living conditions while renting in Ann Arbor, and has served on the Ann Arbor Renters Commission for nearly 2 years advocating for tenants' rights. Please join me in welcoming Hannah. But now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to bring Joe up to the podium, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Green Rental Housing Ordinance and share some resources around helping renters participate in climate action.
Thank you, Jordan, and thanks everyone for coming out. Like you said, my name is Joe Lang. I work for the City of Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations, and want to talk to you a little bit about both the Green Rental Housing Ordinance and then more specifically how renters can fit into it. So to kind of give this broad range, we're going to talk about the ordinance itself, and then again how renters can participate in decarbonization efforts broadly, because I think kind of like Jordan was mentioning, it can sometimes feel intimidating or not always possible. Again, you always hear some of the biggest things you can do around sustainability of, get solar, change all the entire economy, things like that. And that's not always possible for every single person, especially when you don't always have control over all those different levers. So figuring out ways that renters can join and be part of this and make an impact as we go, and also set yourself up long-term for success. So like I said, I'm going to talk about the green rental housing ordinance itself, just so you're familiar with it, understand how it works, and understand who's responsible for what parts of that before talking about some of the things you can do. A lot you might already be familiar with, but it's specifically things you can do that you can do today for no cost. You can just start doing this. It's behavior around that, and then some lower cost things that you might be able to do where you might need to do a little bit more work, might have to work with some folks, but you're still able to do on your own and be part of this before sharing some more on different resources that are available from the city and from other places as well. So starting off, green rental housing, can I get a show of hands? Who's heard of this so far? All right, that feels about right. This is new. This was passed by City Council back in June of 2025, and it officially went into effect in January of this year. So this is new. This is something we're rapidly working on, but what it does is it sets a minimum baseline for health, comfort, and energy efficiency in rental units, really focusing on having a place to not just live, but to really thrive as we're working towards our A2ZERO carbon neutrality goals. It has kind of these three core goals that are within that of promoting, again, safe, healthy, comfortable, and efficient rentals, while reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in the process by using less energy, both within and beyond the building itself, and also helping to standardize market expectations for the quality of rentals, again, with that minimum baseline, so everyone's kind of coming in at the same spot. The way that it works is landlords, when they go up for their rental inspection here in the city, every property needs to get inspected every 2.5 years. If it passes on the first try, you can get an extra 1-year extension to 3.5 years. And there's a couple other fluctuations within that. But in general, properties are getting inspected every 2.5 to 3.5 years. And now at that time, they'll have to meet these new green rental housing requirements. And there's one of two ways that landlords can go about it. The first is what's called the home energy rating system pathway, which is a test that's used kind of across the country in different ways. You can use this on any type of home, any type of building. There's different complexities to it, but what they do is they go through and they really figure out what is the energy performance of that home, of that building, of that unit. They go through, they do a whole bunch of measurements. They do a blower door test that measures how much air is coming in and out of the home or the building at all times. And then it gives a score for that, essentially summing all that up. And for the purposes here, they have to meet a minimum score to do that. They present that, they get that, they're good to go. The other option is the green rental housing checklist, which was developed by us here at OSI with some other collaborators, and kind of similar process. But what that is a big, long checklist, got like over 100 different items on it, and landlords can go through, they pick and choose which items they're doing, which items they're going to be working on and are present in the home or unit. And then they have to, again, add all that up to a minimum score. So regardless of which pathway they're choosing, they have to go through these. They have to meet that minimum level. They submit that information to us here at the Office of Sustainability Innovations, and we get to go review that and see all the things that are there, see what they're doing, see what they're not doing, and figure out all that good stuff. So in terms of how renters fit in theory, you do not have to deal with this. This is something that landlords do. They are responsible for. It should be, in an ideal world, once you get into your new apartment or your new rental, it's great. You're doing good. You don't even have to think about this. There are some things that are around kind of tenant and renter education, such as a renter sustainability session, which you could count this as potentially. Some of you might be here because of that. So there are some things that you might see as a renter, or where you're getting information from your landlord, like, hey, review these materials. Here's some ways you can be more sustainable. Here's how you can find local sustainable food in your community. Here's how to properly dispose of your materials, and more things like that. So that's the only way green rental housing will you'll directly see potentially. Again, there's that indirect, the apartments and the rentals should be improving, reaching that minimum level of efficiency, health, comfort, sustainability, all that good stuff. But there's also things we can all do in our everyday lives. This applies, yes, for renters, it applies for homeowners as well. But as we think about, again, what we have control over as renters, there are things that we can do. The reason we have green rental housing is we know even if we act as sustainably as possible, if the building is inefficient, it's going to be inefficient. So that's why we have green rental housing. Once we get to that minimum level of efficiency, that's where some of these behavior change strategies come in. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here today, so we can think about what we can do as renters. So I'm going to ask a couple questions here and there. Hopefully people respond. We'll find out. But just starting off, as you think about living in your rental unit, what do you think uses the most amount of energy across the span of a year? refrigerator. What do you got? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you got utilities, heat in there, thermostat there. Y'all are the winners today. That is, in fact, the biggest users of energy in our for renters in Michigan is our heating and cooling. That accounts for about 58% of our energy use. Water heating comes in second, so things like your showers, your dishwashing, your laundry, things like that. And then appliances is right there just behind water heating. So that includes things like your refrigerator, if you got a freezer, your TV, computers, all that good stuff. And the reason I just like to show this and highlight this is just because when we think about what kind of changes we can be making, we want to make sure that we're, the changes in these areas that are bigger energy users are going to have a bigger impact. Lighting is one that we always talk about. I'll even say, hey, turn your lights off. That's a smaller energy user than kind of adjusting how we heat and cool our home. So just something to kind of think of in the back of your mind as you're thinking about things you could be doing and ways that you could be saving on energy usage. And the reason that we want to talk about this too, especially for renters, is I think as we've all seen, we all get our lovely utility bills every month. And over the past ever, but also especially over the past couple years, energy bills are going up and up and up. And no matter what, they are going up. And the only way to really combat that is by simply using less energy or getting energy from other sources. And so as we think about how we can cut down on this, that helps every month as we look at things like our utility bills. So starting off, again, none of this is really novel. Some of many of these things I'm sure you all have probably heard of, but just kind of reinforcing some things that you can be doing and can be thinking about doing. So starting off with no cost measures. Again, these are things that essentially you can do for free. You don't have to worry about it. You can get going right away. You generally don't have to ask anyone about it. You can just do it in your day-to-day life. So the first thing, particularly as we're thinking about rentals, is when you're looking at where to live, thinking about what's the most efficient one you can. So kind of going up there, of course, the thing that we always see when we're looking for an apartment or a rental is how much is the rent? That's generally right up there. Hannah's going to talk about some stuff that's been done to make that even more clear for what's out there. But one of the things you don't always see is what are the utility costs? And this is a big thing to be asking, the potential landlords or property managers as you're looking where to live. Because if you're looking at two different apartments, they cost the same amount of rent, but one of them has double the cost in utilities, you're going to be spending a lot more money over the course of living there. So always good to be thinking about that. And if you can, ask for utility bills, see if you can get a sense of them, figure out who pays for them, how much they are, all that stuff. If you're not always able to glean that, you can ask, try getting in some of the more technical questions and see, who knows their snuff. Asking is there insulation in this building? Are the appliances Energy Star rated, which means they're more efficient appliances? And so, or you can even ask what their green indoor housing score is, should they have it. So getting to all these things in advance, just so that way when you're picking and choosing, you got all the, you know what you're getting into when you're going where. The next, once you're actually in the unit, like we said, heating and cooling are the biggest impact on your energy bill throughout the course of the year. And so thinking about how you're setting your temperature, I'm never going to come up here and, be the one who tells you well, set it to 80 in the summer and set it to 60 in the winter. Everyone's comfortable at different levels. Do what you got to do. But just getting to as warm as you are comfortable with in the summer and as cold in the winter as you are comfortable with just kind of helps. Essentially, every degree different you get adds a couple % to your energy bill every single month. So just get into where you are comfortable at. Don't got to go to any of those extremes. Get to where you're comfortable at, but just be cognizant of that. And also, if you have a traditional furnace or a traditional boiler, you can think about programming or changing your temperature when you're not at home. Because if you're sitting there, say you like it at 75 in the winter, if you are not home for 8 to 10 hours, no use in setting that to 75 while no one's in there. Your furnace is just going to keep running. It's going to keep going for no one who's in there. So you can come back, you bump it back up. You can either do this manually when you leave or when you come back. If you have a programmable thermostat like this, you can set that based on your schedule. Or as Andy's going to talk about later, you can get these nice fancy smart ones that do that for you and you don't even got to think about. The one caveat to this, if you're fortunate enough and you got a nice heat pump in there, it's really efficient. Those just kind of work better. You set and forget, ignore everything I just said if you have that. But again, just kind of get into whatever is your most comfortable temperature within reason there. The next we saw this category was our water heating, and therefore our water efficiency is something we can think about. The two biggest areas where this kind of comes up is dishwashing and your laundry primarily. So one of the big things to think about is using the cold or cool setting on your laundry or dishwasher if it has it. Essentially these days, detergent and dishwashing solution, they do a really good job. You do not need to use the hot water setting in the majority of instances for that. You can save that for when you really need it. Something's really dirty, by all means, do what you got to do. But 90% of the energy used in washing your clothes is from the heated water. And because you don't always need that in most cases, no point in doing it there. This will save you money. Your clothes will also appreciate it. They'll last longer, so it's a big benefit there. And then the other portion of this is do a full load of laundry or dishes if you have a dishwasher. You use the same amount of energy, the same amount of water if you're washing a quarter of a load, a half a load as you do a full load. So try to do a full load where you can. Again, it'll help you in the long run there. The next is unplugging electronics or using a smart power strip if you have one. Essentially, when anything is plugged in, it's drawing power. Does not matter if you turn it off. It does not matter if that's your phone charger sitting there and it's not plugged into anything. It's pulling power out of there. It's something called vampire power. So what you can do is if you're not using something, especially if you're not using something for a chunk of time, go ahead and unplug it. You can plug it back in when you get there. Obviously do what you got to do. You don't have to unplug every single thing every time you leave the house, but just be thinking about that. And again, if you get something, a smart power strip, if that's either provided to you, you already have one, low cost option would be to get one. They're like $20 maybe. And what these do is they automatically do that for you. Again, they sense when something is off, they shut off power to that. Why all our outlets don't do that? Great question, but that's where we are. The next is playing around with your shades and drapes. I think all of us can, you can think about a cat who likes to sit out in the, they're sitting on the floor there. They got that nice sunbeam on there. You know intrinsically that when there is sun hitting glass, it makes things a lot warmer in that spot. Conversely, when you're sitting there in the winter, glass is the first place that all that heat escapes out of. So playing around with this can have an impact, again, on how much you're heating and cooling the home. In the summer, you can kind of close up these shades a little bit, prevent all that heat from coming in. You can have light filtering ones, so you're still getting that light, but it's cutting down on that heat. In the winter, if it's sunny out, which it's Michigan. How often do we have sun in the winter? Great question. You can let it open and you can have some of that heat coming in, but otherwise you can use kind of these thick drapes to kind of hold that warm air inside for you. So just kind of playing around with this as you go. And then, like I said, turn off the lights when you leave a room. It's not going to have the biggest impact, but I think all of our parents at some point told us you're completely ruining our finances by leaving on the light in the bathroom when you're not there. So just think about it. Do it from time to time. It's all good. So we're going to pause again. Which of these have folks used? Have you done in your own, where you live? Or more importantly, anything I didn't cover? Because we want to make sure we're getting folks all the different kind of information that is out there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So by setting it to kick in an hour before I show up.
Yep.
Sure.
Perfect. Exactly. Anyone? Yeah. Yeah.
Energy bills in your my apartment. I guess I'll say one.
sometimes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The library caretaker.
That's correct. Yeah, we do have A2ZERO sustainability kits that you can check out here, and exactly you can go through. It's an infrared camera. What it does is essentially shows the temperature of everything, so you can see stuff like where you're losing heat or losing coolant in the summer. So I'm going to go on and talk about some low-cost measures. Some we just kind of touched on here as well. But these are things, again, you might have to spend a little bit of money on it. Again, you might be able to get some free ones. Like sometimes, like I said, sometimes the DT audits disappear for some reason, but they, in general, are there and you can get. But some options where you might need to spend a little money, but it can have a benefit. So first, like we were just saying, is doing a window insulation kit. I will caution this up front. You will most likely want to check with your landlord first before doing this. There are proper ways to install it and there are improper ways to install it. And if you install it improperly, you could run the risk of losing a little bit off your security deposit there. So that said, when you do these, essentially what they are, like we were saying, a little bit of plastic, a little bit of caulk, something like that. Sometimes it's not even caulk, it's rope, something like that. But what it does is just covers up the window. Like I said, the windows are the least efficient part of any building. They leak heat all over the place. They got little cracks all over them. So what this does is that kind of seals that up and prevents those cold drafts you kind of feel in the winter there. The next, like we said, looking at LED light bulbs. In, I don't know, 5-10 years, I don't think I'll ever have to have this slide on there because at this point in time, they just make sense. They last longer, they are more efficient, they do a better job, they light better, they provide the same amount of light, use a lot less energy, last a lot longer. It just makes sense. Again, you might not be responsible for all the lights, but if you got a lamp, something like that, if you are responsible for changing the light bulbs, use LED lights. The next, again, less of something that you need to do, but if you notice something with an appliance that you have that isn't working, contact your landlord as soon as possible. It could be the case, we've seen, for instance, like toilets, if they have a little leak in them, that adds up to like thousands of gallons of water that's just pouring out somewhere and you are being charged for that. Similarly, different appliances, it might be sparking wires and you're just bleeding electricity kind of through there. So as soon as you can, if you notice an issue, contact whoever's responsible and get that fixed. We've touched on this a few times already and we'll hear more about it, but again, look for a smart thermostat. Talk to your landlord about it. I know, where in the rental I lived previously, we had the same deal from DT. They came out like, hey, here's gonna be a smart thermostat. And then they told us we couldn't install it, which, that was cool. But, so you'll have to work with your landlord around it to do it. Again, basically what it does is takes all that guesswork out of there. It senses if someone's not there and it'll start turning it down a little bit. You can program it. You can use an app on your phone to kind of, like we said, kick on the heat like a couple, 30 minutes before you get in there. So there's a lot of really good options there for that. The next, again, less of a thing you'll always be doing, but whenever you have to buy an appliance, if you need a microwave, if you need a computer, TV, whatever, just look for the most efficient one you can get. A nice thing you can look for, it does still exist at the moment, is the Energy Star label. It's a little blue square, which basically just says that appliance is going to be more efficient. You're using the appliance one way or the other, it just uses less energy as you do it. Another, one of the things we've seen a lot over the past few years especially is some of the dangers of cooking with gas stoves, and they also have impacts for climate change and everything like that in addition to our health. And so one of the things you can do is you can get these little plug-in induction cooktops, maybe around $80, $120, something like that, depending on what you're looking for and getting. But these just plug into any regular old outlet and you can cook just perfectly on them. They are more efficient. They heat up things faster. You can boil a pot of water in about a minute, 2 minutes, which is a huge bonus for some folk. And you can touch it and it's not hot. What it does fancy magic with magnets and heats up the pan itself and everything there. And again, so you can just get these, you can plug them in, you can use them wherever, you're good to go. So any other tips and tricks? We can either say free ones that you've thought of now that we've thought about it a little bit more, or any of these ones that, hey, I've paid a couple bucks and it's helped me do all these great things. Yeah.
No batteries or anything else, putting LED strips inside the house, and whenever it's light outside, I don't have to turn a light on. Don't have to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Every bit of energy
Yeah.
Hanging lights up in their rooms. Assuming it's okay with the landlord, I'm not gonna like try not to anger your landlord, but yeah, you got a window. If you have one of those portable solar panels, you can put in the window, hook it up. Yeah.
Any others? Yeah. We believe. We'll interrupt at any time as soon as you got it. I don't care what I'm talking about. Just throw it out there. All right. We're going to move into, again, similar stuff, talking about how, you kind of do this, what resources are out there for this. So the first thing I'll say is you don't need to remember anything I talked about. This is recorded, so you can go back and watch it, but also all of what I just said is on our renter resource guide, our website online. It's got a whole bunch of information. I'm just going to walk through some of the things that are on there just so you're aware. But it includes things like exactly like we talked about. We break it down into what are the big 3 areas you can save on energy and go through the tips and tricks that, again, we just talked about, plus some more ones in these different categories that we didn't go into because they're not, we only have so much time. I didn't want to sit here for, 2 hours telling you about here's how you can use this, here's how you can do that. So you can go there, you can learn, and if you want to learn even more, we have a resource guide on there from the Department of Energy. It's called the Energy Saver Guide. It's like 100+ pages of like everything you can possibly do to save every little bit of energy as you go. We also have stuff because we know in some places people don't always control the heat where they live, and this can lead to instances where it is uncomfortable potentially, where it's getting up to temperatures where you are either way too hot or way too cold. And so we have some information around how you can talk to your landlord both in advance and in the event of when it is happening to kind of help feel more comfortable in those situations, both in terms of comfort with the temperature and comfort with talking to a landlord, because I know that can be intimidating in certain situations, especially when you're in an uncomfortable temperature. We also have, similar to what I touched on, we have tips for how to find an efficient apartment. Again, everything I said earlier is all in here in some way or another, but even more things in there if you really want to get in the nitty gritty. And, you can even just use it as an opportunity to be like, if I ask all these questions and they answer all these questions, maybe they know what they're doing. So you can do that. It's fun. For some people. Dan disagrees, and that's okay. We also acknowledge that we have a lot of residence halls here in Ann Arbor. And, the cool way everything works, green rental housing does not touch University of Michigan properties, and that's okay. And we also know that, people in a residence hall might even have less control over all of these things we talked about. But we do have opportunities that folks can learn, they can learn about. We don't want to, we want to make sure you have those resources as well. Some of the same things that we talked about are going to be present here, but there's also some other things. There's also smaller things. And so even if you're not necessarily directly paying for your, heating and cooling, it's coming out of your tuition somewhere. So making sure you're cutting down on that and setting yourself up for success going forward. In terms of some of the things that can help you get this done, one cool program we have here is called the Home Energy Advisor. This is a free service. It's provided by the city of Ann Arbor and our contractors. Essentially what they do is they come out and they look at where you live. This can be done on single family style homes, but also smaller multifamily. Essentially once you get into like a big stacked building, they can't necessarily help you. But in a lot of those situations they can. And what they do is they come out and they look at all these things we talked about. They see how your energy is being used. They see what's going well, what's not going well. They look at things like your insulation, your air sealing, all that kind of stuff to essentially say, here's where this home, this unit, this apartment is at, and here's how it could be improved. Naturally, again, some of the things are those bigger ticket items that you as a renter might not be able to do, but you can use that, work with your landlord and be like, hey, here's these things, what can we think about? maybe go do this. Because it also provides a lot of resources on how to do that, including financial resources, rebates, tax incentives, all this kind of stuff. So it doesn't just tell you, hey, everything's bad. It's, hey, everything's bad. Here's how you fix it. Or they say, hey, everything's going really good. Here's the things you can continue to do that are good. We have been working more and more with renter populations, especially to include all the stuff that we've been talking about too. So you don't have to sit there and feel like, wow, they just told me to fix my insulation and I can't do that on my own. So there is something for everyone there with that. Again, it'll work for some renters in some situations, but we do have home energy rebates. And while some of the things, this is kind of our current level of where we're at, and then here's a list of some of the rebates that are in there. One, as you can imagine, again, you're probably not going to be the one who's going to go in and pay for the installation, all that. But again, connect to your landlord, say, hey, there's rebates available. So it can kind of help with some of those costs should that need to happen. But some of these things you can do on your end are ever popular e-bikes. Anyone can access. So if you're looking for a alternative form of transportation to drive in, these are a really great opportunity, and we do have rebates available for that. I think it's my last thing I'm talking about, and I'll shut up. That's coming up soon is the Sustainable Energy Utility. If you haven't heard of this, or if you have heard of this, we'll learn some more. So the Sustainable Energy Utility, or SEU, is a supplemental opt-in municipally owned utility, which basically is a way, especially for renters, to be able to access things like solar that we've traditionally not been able to access. You run into, again, that split incentive. Landlord's the one who's got to pay to put it up there. They don't want to do that because they're not paying the utility bills. Renter can't put stuff up there. But what this does is, you do need permission from the landlord, but you can subscribe to the SEU. Solar and storage can be put up on the roof, and then you're accessing that solar and storage. You'll have two separate bills, your DTE bill and then the SEU bill. Because it's right up there, there's less overhead from all the whatever coming from wherever. Can save you money on it and get you access to that clean, renewable solar. We're just really spinning this up this year, and in 2027 is when it's really going to be getting going. But we do have a wait list where you can subscribe to learn more and be able to access this going forward. So a good opportunity for renters to really be able to access solar in ways that have not been able to before. And then actually my last thing for real this time, just want to note that, it's great talking to y'all. We do have a resource available as well called the A2ZERO Ambassadors Program. We run this once a year, so unfortunately this year is full up, but if you're interested, keep this in the back of your head for next year. Basically what it is residents in Ann Arbor can go through this whole program where you learn all about A2ZERO and how to implement it in your community. One of the biggest things we can all do, regardless of whether we are a renter, whether we're a homeowner, whether we're anyone, is talk to people about sustainability. Studies time and time have shown everyone thinks about sustainability, but they think other people don't think about sustainability. So the biggest change you can have, bigger in many cases than going through and changing out your furnace to a heat pump, something like that, getting solar, is talking to people and getting more people engaged in this work, in this movement, in this goal. And that is what the A2ZERO Ambassadors Program sets you up to do. We have plenty of resources on our website as well to learn about this in the span between now and next year when I know all of you are signing up because we just said how great it was. But you can learn more in the meantime, and then next year get going here. So with that for real, I've talked way too long, and I will stop and share with everyone else who's got great things to say.
Thank you, Joe. I do love the fact that we got to learn that you are a cat person as part of your talk today. But again, Joe shared a bunch of really great resources with you, and I do want to recommend folks that we have some flyers and some QR codes to connect directly to some of those resources at our table in the back. So afterward, we would encourage you to do that, again, to learn a little bit more. But thank you again, Joe. And up next, it's my pleasure to bring Andy up to the stage, who's going to tell us a little bit more about doing some of this work in practice and supporting households and landlords in doing some of this work. So Andy, come on up.
Thank you. All right. Yes, okay. Just a show of hands, how many people are renters in Ann Arbor right now? Okay, I assumed at least half the crowd would be. Yeah, okay, this is a good thing to know. All right. So first of all, who are we? Both both my dad and I are co-founders of this business that we've set up. And our main thing is helping landlords go through the checklist option. There's the two options that Joe mentioned where you can have a HERS rater, a look at the house, and then you follow the directions of the HERS rater. Or you can do the checklist and get, I think you need 110 points to be completely done with that. So we help landlords get all 110 points on the first go around. Well, actually, no, I should put this. Yeah. So basically, our business, in terms of where it's coming from, right? I'm an environmental science student. I've worked for state agencies in the fisheries, and my dad has over 30 years of experience working as a landlord in Ann Arbor. So when you mix those two, this is what you get. So this is the two sort of separate pathways. That's the one we focus on. All right, so I was sort of considering like, what is the best information to give the crowd today? And so I sort of have two separate parts of the presentation. One is for what you can do without the checklist masters, and then one is for if your landlord hires us and how we might be interacting with you. All right, so first of all, what is the problem? Well, these, the buildings in Ann Arbor, some of them are very, very old. You got houses from 1890, you know, and I've even come across myself, I've come across a main supportive building that still had the bark on the tree. Perfectly safe, but when you see these sort of constructions, you should not expect that it's, you know, if it hasn't been insulated since then, it's going to be drafty. Balloon framing is a common, you know, structural component of some of these houses. And while the channels, you can see sort of the channels, sort of a junction between a ground and a second floor. There may be, you know, wooden sort of blocks in between that prevent, you know, from being 1-2, but air can still get through that. Even if there were, you know, just small cracks. So basically, in some situations, you have channels all the way from the basement to the attic, and the attic will have a vent directly outside. So I'm gonna fact check Joe about the windows being the least efficient part of the house. For some of these old houses, there are direct air channels from your basement all the way out to outside, So what's the solution to this? And a lot of times you want to insulate, but insulating costs thousands of dollars. And for landlords who, you know, maybe they weren't paying super close attention to the ordinance, or they didn't think it was going to pass, it's now stuck up on them, and suddenly they're considering, do I pay 10 grand to insulate my home, or do I go into the checklist and spend, you know, a couple of days figuring that out? So, but this is for stuff if you're not going with checklist masters. So I'll say that for later. So what can you do instead of a common thing that people do is they'll leave windows open if it gets too hot on the second floor. You know, old house, old heating problems, and you know you'll get really cold ground floors, really cold basements, and you know second or even third floors are boiling. I've been there in the dorm rooms, you know, in college where, you know, on the third floor, you know, you don't have control of the heating and you have to open up the window in the wintertime because it's 80 degrees in your room and you're sweating and you're trying to fall asleep. So I think people tend to, every once in a while, they'll bring that solution over and they'll do that in these single family homes built in 1890. And yeah, we've seen windows open, we've seen even back doors wide open. In wintertime, and there are other things that can be done besides that. It's probably a knee-jerk reaction to do that, but one that is everyone knows about. You know, look at the floor vents, right? The floor vents. You know, make sure if you want it to be hotter, make sure it's open. If it is too cold, make sure that it's not hiding underneath the dresser. Sometimes that happens, and you know, especially if you're on a third floor and it's already, you know, the airflow isn't there, you know, that completely shuts off, you know, where you're getting the heat from. You One that is a little bit lesser known are the butterfly valves or the dampers. And so in a house you have connections from the furnace to the different floors or even different rooms. And sometimes they don't get adjusted from the previous seasonal setting. And so you'll get either too much heat or not enough heat coming to the third floor or the first floor. So asking your landlord, if you have a heating problem, reach out, ask them, notify them of the problem. Don't boil alive on the third floor, and they will adjust this for you. So another one is if you have a doorway to the basement, if it's an unfinished basement, because of that connection between floors in the balloon framing, if you can if you have a door to close it to the basement to lessen that airflow, because there will be an exchange of air between the basement and the first floor and the floors above. So if your landlord is okay with you doing air sealing or weather stripping for a basement door, if you don't have to go down there regularly, there's more than one way down to the basement, then do that. Treat it like it's a door to the outside. Because, frankly, sometimes it literally is a door to the outside. Okay, and then weather stripping, yeah. Yes, so if you have window AC in your apartment, in the wintertime, do remove the window AC. If it's not a type that is, literally nailed to the window, remove it because, you see those plastic accordion, spacers that are attached to those window AC units. They're not meant to keep the cold out. So it's just, room's going to get cold. And then the final one, which is straight out of the 70s, right? The turning your thermostat down. And I have more to talk about this one. But yeah, if you're going on break, turn down your thermostat. Do not turn it off. For the love of God, do not turn it off. That is a common mistake, but if you turn it off and your landlord is unaware, you might get frozen pipes. You get frozen pipes, they burst. If it is the wrong pipe, it is a very messy thing to deal with. So please just turn it down. If you're going to work or you have classes and no one else is at home, you can turn it down. That's a good way to save a lot of money, especially in wintertime. And I actually have more on that on another slide as well. So yeah, this is already covered, but who pays the utility bill? It's going to be the renters, whether it is because the utility bill is in their name or because it's included as part of rent. They're covering the utility bill. The landlords don't have a direct incentive to make energy efficiency improvements on their homes, and because of that, if they haven't insulated, they're even less likely to decide, oh yeah, I'm going to spend 10 grand now and insulate the home. So yeah, they're going to be like, no, I'm going to do something else. But I wanted to show this one dynamic, right? So this is year after year, it's a yearly cycle of energy usage. This is both gas and electricity, right? Most of it's from gas in the wintertime. That's the highest intensity of usage is right during, the middle of winter. So if we were able to cut those peaks, right, we could actually decrease total energy usage by a lot. And I too have a graph, Joe. So I think it might also because we have different averages and different data sets, but the same thing is true, right? Most of it is fossil fuel heating for winter. So gas burning furnaces, your water heaters. Water heating is actually it's way less. So this is just for heating air is, like 76%. So one solution to that is you get the cellulose, exterior wall insulation with cellulose. We just drill and fill. I've done this. My dad's done this. And that can cut a huge chunk of it off. But it's going to be really expensive. It's going to be, a couple $1,000s, probably 10 plus grand for, a 3-story single family home style building. Or you could get a Google Nest thermostat. Now, There's a lot of variables at play as far as how much energy you will save, but we found with some of the houses we put thermostats in, it gets you about 10 to 20% savings in your total combined gas, electric energy usage. So the cost of something like this, the material, the device itself, is somewhere between $100 and $200. Kind of depends on where you get it from. DTE has had programs in the past where they will just give you one. So yeah, dollar for dollar, that's a really awesome solution to increasing your energy efficiency. That is the option that we choose as checklist masters. That's what one we go for, right? A huge part of the ordinance is to increase energy efficiency. That's the way we do it. Out of the 100 different checklist items, that's the way we ensure that there's an energy efficiency improvement so that you have savings as renters. So how does it work, right? We've had thermostats before. What makes this one different? It doesn't require, you can create a schedule and go by that and schedule out your times and plan out when you're not going to be there. But it will do that automatically. It will turn down the energy usage automatically. And it works kind of like an automatic light. So when it doesn't detect motion in front of it, about 6 feet in front of it for 2 hours, assumes no one's home, and it will revert to an eco temperature that you can control. You can set it. And that way you don't have to remember to turn down the heat when you are leaving town or going to class or going to work. It will just do that automatically. And if when it turns down the heat, if you're still there, all it takes is a wave of the hand. And if it's too brutal, you can raise the temperature up so that it's not now suddenly it's 50 degrees in the home sort of scenario, right? So it gives the tenant control of their energy usage as far as heating goes, as far as the majority of the energy that's used, and they can take it as far as they want to go for it. In addition, if you forget and you go on break, and you have the Wi-Fi is working where the thermostat is installed, you can connect to it anywhere in the US. It all works through a Google Home app. You don't have to be there to change the temperature. So yeah, if your landlord will thank you if you refer us to them. I wanted to give just like a ballpark of like the cost difference, right? So my dad, who is a HERS rater, was telling me that it's usually about $1,000 when you first go to the building, and then you have the actual recommendations the HERS rater makes. It's going to involve insulating the home. If it is a building from 1910, that's going to be, it's going to be a couple $1,000, call it 10 grand, right? And then there's another follow-up meeting that might be less. So we're talking around the bouts, give or take a couple thousand, it's going to be about 10 grand to insulate the exterior walls. We will do that. We will get the 110 points for, it varies based on the building and the number of buildings and the combination of items, but, call it 1,000, 2,000 or less. The paperwork part of it is like $400, so way cheaper. And about the same amount of time or faster. I think we've done this in a day before was our like rushed time. So yeah, that for 10 to 20% savings on your combined gas and electricity bill is, it's easier on the landlord. They'll thank you if you refer them to us. Yeah, that's everything. Do I have any questions from the audience? Yeah.
What is your service cost?
The cost depends on the checklist item. Joe was saying that there's like over 100 different items on the checklist. Every housing unit will have its own combination of items depending on the preferences of the landlord. So they have to do that for every single one, right? So we have a process of doing that. I don't want to bore you with all the details. I can, talk about that, but as renters, it's if you're interested, I'll tell you. But
Well, yeah, try to propose this to a landlord. What's it going to cost them?
it's going to cost them less than half of what they pay if they called a HERS rater.
They call it.
A HERS rater to do the job. The HERS rater. They're the guys that you call them. They'll do energy assessment of the home, and then they'll give you recommendations, and you follow those recommendations. There's of the two, options people have for being compliant with the ordinance. Yeah. So it's going to be less than half of what most service ranchers would charge. And I can say that with absolute confidence, But I don't know what they're going to charge exactly, but I figure it's going to be around 10 grand for like a 3-story single-family home style building. It's going to be the combined cost of doing the thing and what they charge. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool, wonderful. Well, that's everything. I'll go over this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Again, something that I didn't know until relatively recently that you brought up in your presentation was that detail about those dampers in the ductwork. That's something I never knew about until very recently, so I'm glad that you brought that up, and to know that that's actually a seasonal change that can significantly impact your experience. So appreciate that. And also just one quick clarification around that question around cost. It is, your services would be paid for by the landlord, that's correct?
Yes, and now
Okay.
the landlord chooses to, this one, all right. How the landlord chooses to, distribute that cost is up to them.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure we clarified that. There will be more opportunities for questions again in the Q&A. But we've got one more presenter to go. And I am very excited to bring Hannah up to the stage because, again, all of this has been focused on some of our sustainability work, but there are a lot of groups and folks in Ann Arbor that are working in the space of supporting renters more broadly. So really excited to have Hannah from the Renters Commission here to do just a little bit of education around renters' rights and what the Renters Commission is up to. Come on up, Hannah.
Thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to tell you guys about the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. So topics we'll cover today is what is the Renters Commission, what are some basic rights that renters have, what the Renters Commission is working on this year, and a few resources for renters in Ann Arbor. So the Renters Commission was established by City Council in 2021 as an advisory commission to advise City Council on matters affecting renters within the city of Ann Arbor. And some of our core functions at the Renters Commission is to evaluate and propose policy. So we review issues that we're hearing about in the city in terms of rental housing. We review ordinances, see if there's any room for improvement. We'll talk to experts. We talk to other city staff, stakeholders in the rental housing market, which includes tenants, landlords, property managers, basically anyone who has anything to do with rental housing. We do plan stakeholder engagement events. I'd argue this is kind of a stakeholder engagement event. We love to get feedback from renters. We get a booth at the Ann Arbor Green Fair. We're planning an event at a library over the next few months. Another big thing we do is we monitor enforcement. So we do talk to rental housing services. We get reports on violations. We review policies to see if there's any room for improvement in improving habitability of housing in Ann Arbor. And like I said, we do communicate with the city. We talk to other boards. We talk to other commissions, other departments. One thing I want to point out that we do not do is we do not enforce housing code. That would be rental housing services. We are very much an advisory commission. And so membership requirements. So who is the Renters Commission? Who's on the Renters Commission? In order to be a voting member, you must be registered to vote in the city of Ann Arbor. You must be a renter. So no property managers or landlords can have a voting seat on the Renters Commission. And our bylaws mandate that we represent a diverse range of perspectives. For instance, we have a University of Michigan student on the commission. We have commissioners with kids, wide variety of perspectives. We want to hear from all varieties of renters in Ann Arbor. So right now, our voting members, we have 7 of us at the moment. We do have a few vacancies, so if you're interested in joining us, I have a QR code on the table over there for the application. We do have non-voting members on the commission, so we have 2 members of city council that join us at our meetings. We have 2 landlords that offer their perspective on rental housing. We have an attorney from University of Michigan Student Legal Services to let us know what kind of issues students are having in rental housing. We currently have a vacancy for an additional attorney that we'd like to have with experience with rental housing law. And we have a city clerk liaison, Kristen, who helps set up a lot of our meetings. She will respond to emails from the Renters Commission, and she'll forward the emails along to our meeting agendas as well. Okay, so I'm gonna go over just a few renters' rights. This is not gonna be a comprehensive list of absolutely all of your legal rights. In full disclosure, I am not a lawyer. I am not qualified to give legal advice. I do have some resources you could go home with, though. Some very basic rights. This is true for pretty much anywhere in Michigan. You have a right to a home that is habitable. If you're going to be signing a lease to live somewhere, it needs to be fit for human habitation. You have a right to privacy, so your landlord can't just show up at any time and let themselves in at any time. They should give proper notice unless it's an emergency. Free from discrimination, protection against unlawful eviction, fair security deposit handling, which our rights and duties booklets also has some more information on that, and protection against retaliation. So if you file a complaint about a code violation, your landlord isn't allowed to retaliate against you in any way. And I did mention the rights and duties booklet. I have a QR code here. We have a QR code on the table. And I do have some physical copies of the rights and duties booklet. It is in the Ann Arbor City Charter that a physical copy of the rights and duties booklet must be given to a renter upon move-in. That doesn't always happen, but we do have copies we could hand out, and you could find this online. And personally, I do prefer the PDF version because you can like Control F and actually search the document to find what you're looking for. But the rights and duties booklet is fairly comprehensive about state law, local law, and it also has a lot of resources for like what agencies you should reach out to if you are having any sort of issue with your housing. And I wanted to provide a summary of some of the more recent ordinances in Ann Arbor because we've been having a lot of changes the past few years as it relates to tenants' rights. Since 2021, we've had a few new laws. The early leasing ordinance mandates at which point in your lease term can a landlord offer you a lease and require that you decide if you're going to re-sign for the next year. We have the right to renew, which requires that landlords provide you the opportunity to renew your lease unless there is just cause for them not to offer you renewal. It was amended in 2024 to close some loopholes. I do have all the details on this in the rights and duties booklets about the exact timeframes or details about the ordinances. Some newer ones that just passed in this past year would be the pre-tenancy fee ordinance. So it limits the amount of fees that landlords can charge for applications, and it bans waitlists. We were having some tenants having issues with very high waitlist fees that wouldn't even guarantee them a unit. So that became effective last year, 2025. We also, of course, have the green rental housing ordinance, which we have some experts here today on the green rental housing ordinance. And the most recent ordinance just passed a couple months ago in January, and they call it the post-tenancy fee ordinance or the rental transparency ordinance. The idea of this one was to make it more clear not only how much your rent is going to be, but how much your utilities would be, and if the utilities will be either in your name or your landlord's name. So this new ordinance requires that if they are not going to be included in rent, your landlord must tell you that they're not going to be included. And any optional fees, which would be things like a pet fee or a parking fee or things that you can't reasonably opt out of, optional fees must appear on the first page of your lease. So in effect, this ordinance will just make it more clear, like what is your actual monthly payment going to be? Like what are your financial responsibilities for your unit? What else we got here? Our 2026 work plan. So every year, the Renters Commission, we draft a work plan in December the prior year of what do we want to focus on for the next year? And we do publish this online. We vote on it. Topics include rental housing legislation, commissioner education, and stakeholder education. And I could show you on the next slide, I have some recent resolutions. These were part of our 2026 work plan, things that we've been wanting to work on. So in January, we did pass a resolution supporting the new post-tenancy fee ordinance. In February, we passed a resolution in support of the comprehensive land use plan, and we did ask to have them consider some regulations regarding short-term rental housing in new transition districts, as well as using incentives to increase supply of low and mid-cost housing. Last month, we also had a presentation from the Ann Arbor's Tenants Union and their proposed legislation for a right to organize. Some tenants have tried to form tenant associations in Ann Arbor and faced retaliation from landlords, so we are endorsing a right to organize ordinance to protect the legal right to organize tenant associations. Some other work plan priorities. I don't want to give you the whole work plan. It's quite a few items, but this is just what we're trying to work on over the next few months. We are hoping to collaborate with the Human Rights Commission, maybe have one of their members attend one of our meetings, maybe one of us will go to one of their meetings. This month, April, we are getting a presentation from the Ann Arbor Fire Department to learn more about fire safety and rental housing, both in terms of what tenants can do to protect themselves and maybe what housing code could be improved to prevent fires. And of course, we're going to have OSI come and talk about the green rental housing ordinance in a few months. Like I mentioned earlier, we're organizing another stakeholder engagement event, hopefully at the downtown library over the next few months. I know we are going to have a table at University of Michigan Festival during Welcome Week. We usually get a table at the Ann Arbor Green Fair, and we'd love to come. If anyone has any other ideas for events that we could table at, that would be awesome. During budget season, we almost every year pass a resolution asking for more funding for city inspectors to help maintain the code enforcement. In Ann Arbor, all units must be inspected every 2.5 years, and every single unit is inspected completely. So it does require a lot of staff to do all these inspections. And I don't know if you've noticed, we've had some new housing pop up, so it's just more units to inspect. Always more work there. And lastly, at least over the next few months, we're going to be working on learning about more renter right legislation topics, such as right to repair, right to counsel, and we'd like to learn more about information transparency and how information about housing is shared on the city permit database stream. Yep. Here's our schedule for the stakeholder engagement events. Please invite me to your event if you want to speak with the Renters Commission. And I do have just a few resources. Pretty much everything can be found on the Renters Commission website, but I do have the QR code for the website. You'll find our bylaws. We publish our agendas every month. You could find our like a link to watch the meeting on Zoom. It's the third Thursday of every month at 5:30 p.m. And we do have public comment periods at the start and end of every meeting. You could always watch the meetings later on YouTube. There are all sorts of renter resources, like basically any ordinance I just mentioned, any resolution I just mentioned. You could find the links on the website. If you want to join the Renters Commission, you can find the application on the website. And lastly, we definitely want to hear from you. We want to get feedback about anything you like about the ordinance we've passed, any room for improvement, any issues you're having. Even if you have a question like you don't know if you should like file a complaint or who to go to for help, our city clerk, Kristen, will direct you to the right resources. Like she could forward you over to rental housing services. If you're a student, she could connect you with student legal services. And any email sent to the Renters Commission email will be attached to our meeting agendas with your name and email address redacted for privacy. And I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. I think it's a really great reminder of how many folks in our community are volunteering their time to support our community. There's lots of different commissions, and I'm really glad that you took some of your time to share the work of the Renters Commission with us this evening. Now, we don't have a lot of time left, so we'll only do about 5 minutes of Q&A, but I do want to save some time and see if any of our audience members have any more questions for any of our panelists.
Two questions, one for OSI staff. Out of curiosity, are there any initial figures on sort of how many landlords or the proportion of landlords going with the checklist option versus energy assessments?
Yeah, trying to think off the top of my head. I think it's kind of a I'd say 60-40 split right now, 60 checklist, 40 HERS. So that's of about 100-ish so far. So we'll kind of see how it goes. One of the big benefits to HERS that we've been seeing, or the reason why, is people are like, I don't want to deal with the checklist. So, but then other people are like, I don't want to pay for HERS. So those are kind of the two reasons we've seen for it largely.
My other question, sorry, was for Hannah. I think is the tenants' rights attorney position, is that also pro bono, unpaid?
Yeah, all of the Renters Commission positions are fully volunteer.
Okay.
I will say it's not that big of a time commitment per month. Our meetings are usually in an hour or two. There's very little prep work, just like looking over the agenda. And like I said, it's only one meeting per month.
Thanks.
Do renters have access to any of these rebate programs, energy efficiency increases? You know, if you had your own gas stove and you're a renter in Ann Arbor, can you do that exchange program, or can you participate in these other programs for energy efficiency?
Yeah, all of those are renters can access. It's just not as common that renters are responsible for their own stove or things like that. But if they are, absolutely they can access it. The rebates themselves are agnostic to who is doing the work.
So renting qualifies you as an Ann Arbor resident.
Correct. Yeah.
Advantage of all of this.
Yep. Absolutely. And like I said, the biggest one we see most commonly from renters is the e-bikes, because you don't have to control their property for that. But yeah, if in a situation a renter is paying for insulation, they could get the rebate for insulation.
They get rebate for putting plastic on the windows of all the other stuff. Is there even something for that low, or is that?
It's yeah, it was more the categories we looked at there was kind of the bigger structural changes of it there. Yeah.
You know, I actually might have a question for the audience. So, I mean, everyone who rents in Ann Arbor, every landlord or management company that manages the properties for landlords, they need to be compliant with this ordinance. What that means is that whether if they're going for a HERS rater solution, or they're going for a checklist solution, whether they're hiring a company like Checklist Masters to help them with that checklist solution, or they're doing it themselves, there's going to be a lot of going in and out of properties and units. So as far as the giving tenants 24-hour notice, I found actually when we go do our service, while there may be 24 hours notice, sometimes not all the tenants know that it was actually going to happen, and then it's a little bit of surprise that they knew someone was coming, but they didn't know what we'd be doing. And it makes me wonder, as renters, is there, as far as what renters can do and to make that communication move smoother, does it feel comfortable if, landlords are simply giving, especially if it's a contractor, whether it's a HERS rater or a Checklist Masters or something like Checklist Masters, giving the contact information of the tenants outright, is that something that feels comfortable to make that communication more smoothly, or go more smoothly, or is it that like
I think that if you're going, If you're going to come in and you want to communicate with them, as part of the process of talking to the landlord is to have a request for communication as part of your initial application form to the landlord, so that they can go and talk to the tenant and find out what they're comfortable with.
Any other thoughts or questions? Something just real quick that I was going to bounce back to Hannah. I know in your last slide you said that there were opportunities potentially to join the commission, but are you actively looking for seats or for additional folks to join the commission?
Yes, we have 3 vacancies right now for the voting members. So, like I said, you have to be a renter in Ann Arbor to qualify to be a voting member. And there's really no other prerequisites. Like, you don't need to have any policy background. You don't need to have any particular education. We do want a wide variety of voices on the commission to give a variety of perspectives. And it really is only a few hours of commitment per month. And yeah, we'd love to have as many people as possible on the commission. We do have 3 seats right now. I have a QR code to the application over there, and you could also find it on the Renters Commission website.
Thanks, Hannah. You should consider joining. It looks like Sarah also got a hand up over there.
Is it the city of Ann Arbor or Ann Arbor proper?
It is the city of Ann Arbor, yes.
Good question.
And are your presentations available as PDFs or something that we can get? I was having trouble taking a picture because your faces would focus on you instead of the screen. So I was having a difficult time taking a picture of any of those items. Can we get a PDFs of these presentations anywhere?
Yeah, there will be a recording on YouTube, but if any individual wants the actual presentation themselves, as long as the panelists are comfortable with it, I'm happy to share. And we can speak after the Q&A.
Yeah.
Just a quick question on the recording. Is this public YouTube video, or is this a public YouTube video that we can find?
Yeah. So actually currently right now there's a synchronous live that we're doing on YouTube, which again, we appreciate the library's support on. So for anyone that's joining us virtually, we appreciate you being here. There will be a recording published. The full recording of this event will be published to the CTN Ann Arbor YouTube channel. If you look that up on YouTube, they will have a playlist of sustainability or Office of Sustainability and Innovations videos, which this will be posted to. And again, if you want to chat after about exactly where to find that, or I can give you a note with that written down, I'd be happy to. But yeah, all of the recordings are posted to YouTube on Ann Arbor CTN channel.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I think that we might transition to a few final items as we close out. Before we say goodbye this evening, I wanted to share just a few things about how you can stay engaged with us and the work we're doing. We always encourage folks to subscribe to our newsletter. We have a few printed copies at the table in the back if you want to take a look. Please also follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook at A2ZERO 2030. And we also have a really busy month in April of events coming up. So I do want to highlight that we have an Earth Day Fest event coming up Sunday, April 19th from 12 to 4:30 p.m. at the Leslie Nature Science Center. We will also be doing numerous events on April 25th. The first will be an electronics collection event. If you have electronic waste that you've been looking for an opportunity to have a place to take that. We will be doing an electronics collection from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Again, there is a flyer by the table with a QR code, how to sign up for that. There are specific slots and times, so if you are interested in that, please sign up. And then later in the day, we will be doing one of our larger annual events, which is the Climate Teach-In on Saturday, April 25th, and that will be from 1 to 5 p.m. at Mitchell Elementary. We also have a registration for that Both of these events are free, but we do encourage you to register for the climate teach-in. That's partially just so that we can do some food planning. But the climate teach-in will be a great opportunity to learn from a lot of different speakers and folks attending that event. And another tip, we are doing the free tree giveaway at the same location as the teach-in. All of the slots are currently filled for the free tree giveaway, but often there are some trees left over. So if you do come and join us for the climate teach-in, you may be able to go home with a few little saplings as well if you're interested in some free trees. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will have our next sustainability forum on April 28th, celebrating the A2ZERO Community Cookbook. And we really hope that you join us for that. And again, we will be hanging out for the next few minutes. If you have any other questions or thoughts that you want to share with our presenters, we encourage you to do so. But the very last thing that I would request you do is, if you're willing, please scan this QR code and fill out a short survey that helps us get to know how you heard about the event tonight, and how we can best stay in touch. At the end of that super short, like 60-second survey, there will also be an option to take a demographic survey, which we would encourage you to do. This just helps us better understand who we're reaching with our events. Both of these are anonymous. You don't need to provide your personal information. But that feedback is helpful to us. And again, thank you for joining. And we'll be here at the table for some additional conversation. Take care tonight. And thank you again to the library and the presenters for their time this evening. Thanks, everyone.